Happy Halloween, everybody. This is going to be my final horror movie rankings for this spooky season. I've been doing a lot. I know I've been doing a lot of them, and this time around we're going to be talking about why not finish it with these guys, the Universal monsters. Now, as always, if you think a movie, I love all these movies. I want to preference that this is one of those times where it's like I love all of them. I love all the movies. It's just like a level of love. It's like trying to rank who's your favorite child. Don't believe what your parent says. I love you all equally. Bullshit. They don't love. There's limits to that love. Trust me, I know. Anyway, so yeah. So as always, if you think a movie should be higher or lower on the list, that's totally fine. This is just my personal preference. This is just how. This is just how I see this is just my personal preference for all of this. So yeah. So as always, just comment below. Let me know what you guys think, where your rankings are. Also, I'm not going to do every single movie because there's a lot, and we're just going to talk about the core 8 movies. We're going to be talking about the core 8 movies that everyone knows. It's like the essential 8. I also will not be talking about the silent era films Hunchback and Phantom of the Opera, even though technically they were the first 2 original monsters. They're like Universal's been relatively bringing them back, but they're just kind of like not seen with the big 8. Probably because they're public domain. That's probably what it is. But they're trying their best to bring Hunchback especially back. There will be a Phantom. So let's get started. So starting off with the bottom of the list is, of course, the Claude Rains Phantom of the Opera. The Claude Rains Phantom of the Opera, is it a good movie? Yes, it actually won an Oscar. It's a technical spectacle. The opera is great, but there's also some humor in there. But really, as a horror movie, it kind of falls flat. Claude Rains gives a great performance as the Phantom, but the problem is they don't utilize him enough, and it's very lackluster. The love triangle thing is treated more as like a gag. It really does feel like this movie wanted to do more of a wanted to be more of a romantic comedy than it did a horror movie. And also, it kind of clashes with the whole thing of having it in color. If you do want to say if you wanted a Phantom of the Opera representation, and it does feel like they're trying to do that more, is with the original Lon Chaney Phantom of the Opera. But this movie's always the Claude Rains one is always included in collections, mostly because that's the one they own. That's the one they have ownership to, and not the Claude Rains one. Not the not the Lon Chaney Sr. one. That's what I meant to say. They have ownership of that one, whereas the Lon Chaney Sr. one is in public domain. Anyway, I digress. So moving on to our next movie, that is The Mummy. The Mummy is a film that's very atmospheric. It's very beautiful. It almost feels like a dream sequence, really. But the problem is that it does take... it does kind of run a while. It does kind of have a slow pace to it. But that opening scene is by far one of my favorite moments in horror, period. That opening scene where the mummy is coming out of his sarcophagus and just casually picks up the scroll, and the guy just screams and just laughs hysterically as you don't see the mummy, you see him leave the room. And then that whole exiting scene of he went for a little walk. That scene just chilled me to the bone. It still does. It's like I said, it's one of the best moments in horror, period. This movie does take a lot from Dracula. Obviously, a lot of the actors. It also takes a lot of the beats, but it is definitely one of the most violent of these films before the Haines Code. But yeah, I still love this movie, and of course, it did give way for the inspiration for later remakes such as the Brendan Fraser movies. Anyway, moving on to our next one, The Wolfman. The Wolfman is a very atmospheric movie. A lot of these movies wrote down the playbook for atmosphere. Let's get that straight right now. These movies wrote the playbook on, how to, make an atmospheric movie. And that's kind of and that's really what this movie is. You never see the moon. Yeah, I didn't realize that first watching. I was like, you never see the moon. Jack Pierce's Wolfman design for Lon Chaney Jr. is amazing. But one thing I've come to appreciate more, why this movie's just a bit higher on the list for me as of late, is because I have had my eyes open of what this film really is about. It's kind of like it's almost, the Wolfman is really almost like a psychological horror piece where we follow Larry, who is this very suave, very charming, he's this, he's got this gusto to him, and at the same time, you see, after he got bit by the wolf, you see a mixture of trauma mixed with that hysteria, like that ticking clock down, and you see all of that, that charisma, that kind of boyish charm, slowly strip away until you just see a man who is slowly going insane. So I really do like that. I think that's the big thing, is that this is almost like the Wolfman is really more of a psychological horror in a way. So I really have come to appreciate that way more. Anyway, so let's move on to our next movie, The Creature from the Black Lagoon, the last of the Universal monsters. Actually, a person, for those who don't know him, for any newcomers here, that guy is the only that was the last Universal monster who did sadly pass away earlier this year. I was fortunate enough to get an autograph from him, and it's probably my most prized possession. It's in my little Cave of Wonders back here. Closet / Cave of Wonders, my library, all of that. That's where it's hanging proudly. I was so happy to meet Raquel Browning, the creature who did the swimming parts. And furthermore, I've really come to love this movie as like the start of it. 1954 was a big year for science fiction monster movies. You had this, them, those are pronouns. You had this movie, them, and Gojira appear in finally make its debut in Japan. All of those movies, 1954 was a big year for like the atomic age. Even though yes, the creature isn't an atomic monster per se. It's more of like a story of King Kong, where people go to this unknown land and a monster this monster just wants to be left alone. It's a very somber story, it's a very tragic story, and the underwater scenes are brilliant. The creature design is by Millicent Patrick is breathtaking, and I don't think anyone, if they ever try to get a creature film, a Creature from the Black Lagoon movie off the ground, they will never, and I mean never, be able to replicate that kind of level of detail and combination of man and fish to the creature like Millicent did. But yeah, I will say though, the blaring horns when the creature shows up, even like it's just his hand, it does kind of wear on you a bit. And also, I can't tell the two male characters apart. Even when they say their names, I'm like, wait, which one are you again? But all in all, still a great movie. It's a fun adventure movie. And yeah, there you go. So, next up on our list. The next movie on our list is Dracula. So, Dracula, the first of the Universal monsters. The one who started it all, played famously by Bela Lugosi, the man, the myth, the motherfucking legend. This movie I've actually really appreciate. I actually once tried to listen to the movie with the Philip Glass soundtrack, and I was like, I'm not feeling it. So it actually works better as kind of having no soundtrack. It's got great atmosphere. Dwight Frye as Renfield is perfect. There's just yes, it does. It is a movie that does have its flaws of being like one of the first movies to be one of those first sound movies, and Hollywood was still trying to figure out, that transition between silent and sound movies. But this did amazing work. All in all, yeah, perfect movie. So, Next up, we have Frankenstein. Frankenstein took everything that was great about Dracula and doubled it. It kind of did. It was the second movie that came out the same year as Dracula that also helped kickstart the Universal monster movies. Boris Karloff will be forever known as the monster. And Colin Clive's Frankenstein, everyone will be trying to replicate it, just like Bela Lugosi's Dracula. The set design is great. The just everything about that movie is this dark horror story. Probably my favorite scene in the movie, and I don't think people talk enough about it, is the scene where Maria's father's carrying her body through the town, and like you look in the background and you see people like, oh, it's so much fun, what the fuck is that? And they're all like, it slowly goes from this joyous moment for Frankenstein being married, it's a great wedding day, and it turns into a moment of from beauty to horror. It's a great representation of that. So that was probably my favorite scene in the whole movie, just personally. But yeah, moving on now to Bride of Frankenstein. The Bride of Frankenstein is arguably the best of the Universal monster movies. But I will say that, like, personally, you probably know who's my number one at this point. But Bride, it's the same thing with Alien or Aliens. If you say Bride is the best Universal monster movie, no one's going to contest that. It's the same. But it's a beautiful movie. James Whale took everything that he made great about the first movie. That he took everything that he did with Frankenstein and perfected it and did better with Bride of Frankenstein. Yes, the titular bride doesn't show up until the last 5 minutes of the movie, but that character leaves such an impression. It's a great story. Boris Karloff has probably one of the best performances as his life as the monster, and this is it's a beautiful movie, especially when you know what James Whale's life was like. And there's just some beautiful imagery in there, like when the monster's hoisted up, almost like Messiah style, and just little scenes like that. You can see why, this is a movie that you could see why, like, Stan Lee, when he said, like, the Hulk was based off of Frankenstein, you can see why with this movie. But yeah, so you've probably guessed what my favorite of the Universal monster movies is. And that movie, ladies and gentlemen, is none other than The Invisible Man. The Invisible Man is a phenomenal movie for me. Technically speaking, 1933, and having effects like that was like having Star Wars effects in 1977. That movie, the level of technicality and level of work they had to do to perfect that film and how they did those effects was groundbreaking in 1933. Does it look dated now? Yeah, obviously, but to put your mindset back to 1933, it was like the same time that Willis O'Brien was doing excellent film work on King Kong. Yeah. But yeah, not only that, they got the perfect guy to voice the Invisible Man. Claude Rains gives a phenomenal performance. There's great. It's almost like a horror comedy. There's great comedy. There's great setup pieces. And the other thing is, too, you generally don't know where the Invisible Man is. You generally don't know where he is until he starts, cackling like a madman. All around, technically great, atmospherically, acting-wise, all of it. So that's my personal favorite of the Universal monster movies. But you guys tell me in the comments below, where do the Universal monster movies rank for you? Just comment below, let me know. Other than that, hope you all enjoyed this. I'm Mr. Multiverse. I'll see you next time in the Multiverse.